Welcome back to Office Hours as we barrel towards the holidays. All right, Griffin, roll the questions.
Hey Scott, my name is Brian Garrett Glazer, and I'm an aerospace reporter. Lately, I've been writing about the emerging industry that's being called urban air mobility. If you aren't familiar, it's basically the Jetsons come back around again. Hundreds of companies, from small startups to Boeing and Airbus and Bell and Honeywell, are working on flying prototypes of electric or hybrid aircraft that can carry cargo or a few passengers from point to point within a city or city to suburb in cities with terrible traffic. Think LA, Mumbai, Sao Paulo. Uber wants to make aerial rideshare a reality, and they think they can get the cost down close to driving via the fuel and operational savings that come with electric propulsion, introducing effective ride sharing into aviation, and eventually autonomy. So my questions: what are your thoughts on this industry? What will determine its success or failure? And who do you think the winners and losers might be? Thanks a lot.
Oh my God, I love this question. First off, aerospace reporter? Dude, I am so attracted to you right now. Aerospace reporter. How did you even get into that field? That's awesome. Good for you. I think this is so exciting, so incredible. And I've just always been incredibly fascinated with aviation. One of the reasons I continue to work is I want my own jet, which I realize is indulgent and obnoxious. But when the dog rolls into Challenger 300, he's just going to seem so much more interesting. No? Report on that, you sexy aerospace beast reporter. Anyways, you asked about urban mobility. I think it's super exciting. I'm super into it. I hope it happens. I think it's one of these technologies that may take longer. You know, Bill Gates said what's supposed to take 3 years in technology takes 10, and what's supposed to take 10 takes 3. I think this is one of those that probably takes 10. I think Uber is largely doing it back when their capital as a function, almost like a hangover of when capital was really cheap for them. They're doing Uber Copter in New York. These are all things that, in my view, were probably thought up when Uber had visions of being this kind of total transportation portal. And now that it's crashing towards zero, as everyone's realized their core business is a shitty business, they're going to have to focus. So I wonder if Uber's even in this business in 12 months. But Honeywell, Boeing, those guys, I mean, those guys are gangsters. I don't know if you can do this cost efficiently. I don't know much about aerodynamics and physics, but my sense is the battery, the size, the weight of the battery that's required to have a large enough charge to power enough rotors to get an electrical vehicle airborne is pretty substantial. That there's just a general technology issue here or limit here. I hope it happens. It'll be interesting to see what cities do in terms of airspace. I think that probably the bigger innovation, unfortunately, is going to be around drones and some very dangerous innovations. I think drones are potentially going to be kind of the next big weapon of terrorists, but you didn't ask about that. So look, I'm going to ask, boss, aerospace reporter, that you leave us a recording and give us your view. I hope it happens. I think it's largely a vanity and branding project from Uber right now. And I think the aerodynamics of it, and I'd love for your viewpoint here, I think the aerodynamics of it make it kind of cost prohibitive in the short term, but hopefully we'll have this in 7 to 10 years in some great urban centers and sign me up. Thanks for the question.
Hey Scott, good evening from Bali. Ben Bradbury here, and as I record this, we're just under a month away from a brand new year. 2020 will no doubt come complete with its own unique set of challenges, and I'd love to know what you think those might look like for Section 4. What do you predict will be your company's biggest obstacle in delivering affordable, accessible business education to professionals next year?
Wow, that dude sounds like a game show host. My gosh, you have a second career, or maybe it's your first career. You should do Match Game Bali. I went to Bali once, so I had this incredible opportunity to sit in at the board meetings of Levi Strauss & Company and ask that I would just listen and then stand up and in an unfiltered way give my viewpoint on what was going on or what the company should do, which is an incredible opportunity for someone. I think I was 33, 34. So I used to travel around the world to these board meetings because Levi Strauss & Company like to go to different locations. It's a global company for their board meetings. And I went to Singapore, down in Singapore, so I went to Bali because I'm like, well, I'm in Southeast Asia. I should take advantage of it. Went to Bali, checked into the Ritz-Carlton, went to dinner, and there were 81 people at dinner, specifically 40 honeymooners and me. And I remember all these couples feeling sorry for me, no less than 5 or 6 came up and said, would you like to join us? And I ended up having dinner with these newlyweds from Minnesota. The Travises, I remember. But that is just not what you asked. That is just not what you asked. So what is the biggest challenge that Section 4 faces in 2019? I think the missing link here, quite frankly, is leadership. And that is both myself and some of the leadership here needs to demonstrate greater grit, needs to demonstrate more intensity, needs to start holding ourselves more accountable to produce more content, and needs to start kind of putting it out there in terms of what the actual offering is and signing people up. I think we're a little bit in what I'd call paralysis analysis, and that is we're thinking about what we want to do and how we want to be, and we're being very thoughtful to a fault. I don't know what it is, and it feels awkward to say this, but I think our biggest challenge in 2020 is demonstrating the leadership, at least senior management, demonstrating the leadership that our younger people and the opportunity deserve. Next question.
Hi, Scott. My name is Ben Bench, and I just want to say what a huge fan I am of yours. I agree with so many of your points, and I love your enigmatic style and being a self-proclaimed progressive capitalist. I listened to your podcast recently with Kara at Stanford University, and I have a question about the fail that you discussed. You said your loser was, quote, the cowardice and poor vision of withdrawing from Syria. I have to ask for clarification. Are you more upset with the way in which the withdrawal was handled, or more that you actually think withdrawing was a mistake?
Wow, Ben, that is a thoughtful question. And just so our listeners know, I actually don't read these questions before because I do think that people have a nose or they have a sense for authenticity. And so I immediately panicked kind of when you asked me that question because I don't have the domain expertise to answer it thoughtfully. I'll just tell you why I think I called it cowardice. One, I'm inclined to think that almost anything Donald Trump does involves some level of cowardice, and it's an unfair bias I have against the individual. The president stands for everything I'm not. So whenever he does something and the media piles on, I think I become unfairly, and I'm part of the problem, part of the chorus that says this is just a stupid idea. Now, to your point, I think it was probably more the way it was handled. I do think there's something to be said for these endless wars don't make any sense. I do think there's also something to be said that there's so much war in that region. At some point, it's almost like the Crusades. They're just going to have to fight it out until they get sick of killing each other and get exhausted or more open to some sort of solution. But my sense is that we were fighting kind of shoulder to shoulder with the Kurds. We encouraged them to take huge risks, which they did, and we sort of left them very naked, left them very exposed to Turkish forces, and with a little bit more thought and a little bit more measured withdrawal and a little bit more dialogue or deference to our military leaders on the ground there, that we would have decreased the likelihood of some terrible things happening to the Kurds and in that region of Syria when we pulled out in the manner we pulled out. So the honest answer is I don't have a lot of domain expertise here. I'm guilty of a knee-jerk reaction, which doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong, but I would argue it was the manner, as you pointed out, in which we withdrew. And also I had a chance to interview General Jim Mattis at the NASDAQ, and I just find this guy just such an impressive man, just such a great role model. And the thing that impressed me so much about him was here's a guy that is a warrior, and he's called the monk warrior because he's very thoughtful, devoted his whole life to the country. And when I asked him what the greatest challenge was facing America, the greatest threat, I thought he might say, I don't know, ISIS or Russia or the border between North and South Korea. And what he said was that he thought that the biggest danger, the biggest threat was actually internal, and that it was a lack of empathy, a lack of comity of man, that we were more focused on, oh, you voted for him or her, well, then I don't like you, and I think you're a bad person. And that this division ripping apart our society internally was the biggest threat. And I thought that was so moving that someone who's kind of raised in this sort of atmosphere of war would identify that as the biggest threat. And he felt that the way we withdrew from Syria was not handled well. So in someone I trust and respect a lot and strikes me as very thoughtful, didn't think we handled it well. So sorry, long-winded answer. I would say it's probably more the fashion and the manner with which we withdrew as opposed to the withdrawal itself. Thanks for the question. So we sat down with Adam Alter, NYU professor of marketing, my colleague and a friend, in addition to being the New York Times bestselling author of Drunk Tank Pink and Irresistible. And great hair. Great hair. Adam Alter, professor of marketing with an appointment at the Business School and the Department of Psychology. And also you're head of what's called the Faculty Grievance Committee. Is that right? Which means that guys like me come to you to just literally fucking bitch all day long.
It's called, the euphemism is faculty council.
That is literally the worst job in the world. This totally indicates you have terrible judgment that you would take on that assignment.
Yeah, you can only dodge these things for so long. Eventually,
oh my
they come
gosh.
home. Yeah.
I can't imagine a group of whinier, more expectant people, but distinct to that, fairly good judgment across the other areas of your domain expertise. Written 2 best-selling books, Irresistible, about the rise of addictive technologies, and before that, Drunk Tank Pink, with a lot of insight into kind of behavioral psychology. Talk about how we consume media now versus the past.
Yeah. So, if you think about how we consume media in the 20th century, what we did was we consumed until there was a gentle cue from the world that we should probably do something else. Mm-hmm. So you'd open the morning newspaper, the physical copy, and either you'd get to the end of an article and then move on with your day, or you'd read the whole paper and get on with your day. If you watched a TV show, you'd watch it, you'd get to the end of the episode, and instead of sitting in the couch for 6 days waiting for the next one, the sign that the credits were rolling was time to move on. And so there were built in what we call stopping cues in almost every medium that we consumed, whether it was books with chapters, newspapers, magazines, everything had a natural end to it. And humans rely on those ends. We tend to be creatures of great inertia. We just keep doing the thing that we're doing mindlessly until something shuffles us along to the next thing. Now, casino owners have known this forever. They remove all sense of the passage of time. They don't have clocks. They don't want you to see that it's the 4th sunrise since you sat down at the slot machine. And that's now been adopted much more broadly in the media we consume today in the 21st century. So one of the things we know is that a lot of the companies that we interact with have systematically eradicated these stopping cues. This is true, for example, with Netflix introducing post-play. The default becomes not that you will stop watching at the end of the episode, but that you'll just roll on to the next one, that 10 seconds after one ends, the next one just plays. That's by design. That removes a particular cue that used to lead people to stop and do something else with their lives. So when Reed Hastings was asked, the CEO of Netflix was asked, who is your primary competition? His answer wasn't Hulu or YouTube or broadcast TV. His answer was sleep. So the way to short circuit sleep is you have people at 4 a.m. watching 4 episodes of a show, and then the 5th one just automatically begins. It almost feels rude to stop at that point. They just keep rolling through. So a year after Netflix introduces that, binge viewing is the word of the year in like 5 dictionaries around the world. Right. So this systematic eradication of those cues, endless feeds, endless scrolling, YouTube videos that play one after another, it short circuits what for humans for millennia has been the way that we've navigated the world with and not spent too much time on any one thing. And that's I think a hallmark of media today, I think.
And my boys love video games, and you've done some work on gaming companies releasing different versions on the same platform. What's that about?
Yeah, so as I've said, I'm really curious about why we spend so much time in front of screens. And if you look at, a lot of us have a low grade, what seems to be like an addiction. It's not great for us to be spending that much time on our screens 4, 6, 8 hours a day, but it's not medically or clinically damaging. It's not great though. But there are some people who have what amounts to an addiction. And a lot of these people are in treatment and they tend to be addicted to games. It's usually a big game like World of Warcraft or Fortnite or something like that. And the thing about these games is they have enough players that they have access to just reams and reams of data. So what these companies will do is they don't need a strong theory of what drives people psychologically. You don't need to be smart and sophisticated. All you need is to say, I have data from millions of players and I have 15 different versions of the game in mind. I have no idea what's going to engage people, so I'm going to try them all. Yeah. So it's this process of A/B testing, but across different rounds. So let's imagine your World of Warcraft, people are completing missions in groups or guilds. One, you have, let's say you're playing with 1 million users. That's going to be your sample set. You take 500,000 of them and you give them a mission where they're trying to rescue a male character. The other 500,000, you ask them to rescue a female character. Then you see how many times they play, how long they play. Is there a difference? Maybe people play 3% more for more time when it's a female character over a male character. So then you say, all right, we're going to privilege missions where we're rescuing female characters. So now what we do is we take that same 1 million people or a different 1 million people, and now we have them all trying to rescue a female character, Half of them do it by the ocean, half of them do it and they're rescuing the character in a forest. Turns out people love the ocean. They'll play 10% longer if they're by the ocean. If you reiterate over and over again, or iterate over and over again, and you get data, what you end up doing is weaponizing the platform. So the version that lands on my desktop when I'm playing has been through this kind of trial by fire multiple times. It is the evolved winner of all of those combats.
Sure.
And it's impossible to resist because all the features that hooked people along the way are now right in front of me. And a lot of companies do this.
But my sense is that's nothing that Mars doesn't do with a Snickers bar. It's just that we've never seen companies as good at it. They're not doing anything different. We've just never seen anyone master the art such that the art becomes somewhat frightening and almost villainous. One of the things I think that you are known for is the alchemy of addiction. The features that make a product addictive. Can you run through those?
Yeah, there are a whole lot of them. One thing is the removal of stopping queues. So once you begin them, there is no queue that pushes you onto the next
Endless
thing.
scroll.
Endless scroll, just bottomless feeds, things like that.
Episode 8 starting in 4, 3, 2, 1.
Yeah.
Right.
So all of that sort of stuff. So that's the first thing. The second thing is they give you variable rewards. There's old research looking at rats in a cage. If the rats don't know how many times they have to push a bar to get rewards, they will play that game, what amounts to playing a casino slot machine.
Yeah.
Even after they're no longer hungry, they'll get this pile of pellets next to them, just piling up. They're not hungry anymore. Yeah. They will push that bar to the point of exhaustion and then death. That's how much they enjoy the process. Crazy. Now we have a prefrontal cortex that is saying to us eventually, maybe don't do that. Maybe get some food and do something else. But it shows you how compelling that kind of variable reward process is. So how many likes you're going to get in response to a particular post is part of that. Checking email incessantly. Who knows what's going to be around the corner? Shopping websites where you don't know what's going to be there next time you go to the homepage of Amazon. Who knows? It could be the greatest deal of the century. These sorts of variable rewards are a big driver. Then goals, the goals that are naturally built into a lot of the platforms we use, a round number of likes, and a round number of followers, retweets, regrams,
it's
shares.
our competitive instinct, right?
Absolutely. It becomes the currency by which we measure our own self-worth.
100%.
And that goal-setting process is naturally built into a lot of these platforms. And then there's a big one that I think explains a lot of the success of Instagram, and that's making things social, gamifying them, but in a very social way. So before Instagram came out, about 10 months before, a program named Hipstamatic came out, which was very similar to Instagram and its functions. Basically, you take a photo with your camera on your phone, you put a filter over it, it looks good. The difference between the two was the founders of Hipstamatic didn't create a native social network built in, so that as soon as you took the photo, it was shared with whoever had decided to follow you. The Instagram founders very quickly said people are going to get bored of just retaining photos on their cameras, and allowing them to share it on existing social networks is not enough. We need to have a native built-in social network within Instagram. And so the two programs did basically the same thing, but the founders of Instagram very wisely turned this idea into tens of billions of dollars of value by realizing that people were kind of endlessly fascinated by what other people think of them. And so by posting over and over again, it's a new way of testing each time. Do people like me? And because some posts get more likes than others, that occasional negative feedback is what spurs you to post 10 more
100%.
Times seeking the positive feedback.
It's so fucking pathetic. Tobacco had a stranglehold on my household. And I remember just watching my dad smoking, and the exact behavior, he'd be a little bit bored, wanting a dope hit, wanting to have a friend, wanting to be more social, and that was easy, just take out a cigarette, and the tactile movement. And for me, tobacco is Twitter. And that is, if I'm sitting at a table, I'm a little bit bored, I just immediately pull out my phone and I check my Twitter. And it's not seeing the likes that's the dope hit, it's right before, not knowing if a piece of content I put out is liked. And the scary thing about it is engagement is Latin for enragement, because that's what keeps me engaged. Because when I speak a lot, I spoke last night at this Wired thing, and immediately after, I go to Twitter to see how I did. And there'll be film or video, and then how many likes or dislikes, and it feels great. And 98% of it is really positive and wonderful feedback, and people probably being overly generous to me. And 2% is, this guy's a fucking fraud.
And you're going to remember that.
And that shit enrages me, but quite frankly, it keeps me coming back. So let's talk about addiction leading into the senses. And I think a lot of us I think that if we were to say, what's the sense that's most powerful to brands or has the strongest link to emotion, we would probably say sight.
Mm-hmm.
What say you?
Sight is something we don't question.
Yep.
When we see something, we believe it to be true, although it often deceives us. That's why eyewitness testimony is so shaky.
Yep.
But the thing that lingers most in memory, that has the biggest effect on us emotionally, that often gives us a gut punch, is smell.
Yeah.
You'll come around a corner in some city or some town, you'll smell a perfume you haven't smelled in 30 years, and it'll transport you immediately and powerfully back to whatever it was that was going on then. It might have been a perfume your mom wore.
Right.
It might have been your first girlfriend or a cologne that your boyfriend wore. You know, whatever it is, it will bring you back to this moment in a way more powerful way than any other sense can do. Vision never transports you quite like that. Yeah. You know, you'll see a movie you saw and it'll bring you back to the 90s or something, and you'll say, oh, that's really nice. But it doesn't hit you in the gut. There's something about smell and its connection to certain brain regions and its role and how deeply embedded it is in long-term memory that is much more transporting and more powerful in that sense.
Yeah, I can say that. The other thing that I always thought really, at least for me, brought up a ton of emotions is when I hear an 80s music.
Oh, yeah.
And it just takes me back. I'm like, oh my gosh, my sophomore year.
Yeah.
With, David Frey and Eddie Blau in room 203 in the fraternity listening to, Bruce Springsteen's, I'm going down. That really transports me.
Yeah, so that's true actually about music preferences. You mentioned your sophomore year. I guess you're probably like 19 around then. Yeah. So there's a lot of work looking at when we have crystallization of our preferences, when they basically fix.
Yeah.
And if you ask almost everyone, tell me what's your favorite music, anyone who's over about the age of 19 or out of college, almost everyone, there's something magical about that period where your taste crystallizes. So whatever happened to be popular when you were 19, that's the thing, you just gravitated towards it. Most people do. And it's this incredible switch that happens where until you're 19, you're like grazing the savannah for music options. Right. It's like you're testing things out. When you get to about 19, 20, 21, and it's often tied to college if you're in college, or even if you're not, it's tied to just becoming an adult, you settle on whatever it is then, and that doesn't change. You might start liking new music after that, but what really hits you in the gut is to hear the music that was played when you were 19. That'll really throw you back.
I was so like R.E.M., English Beat, Madonna, Michael Jackson. Yeah. I mean, I am blessed.
Yes, you are lucky.
And also, Adam, just in general, 80s music is a superior art form.
Agreed.
So I'm blessed there.
I got Limp Bizkit. That's what I got.
Limp Bizkit.
Yeah, that's what I got playing through my head. So I was not blessed.
Nice. And you have this, you're trying to bring new definition to the word juice.
Yeah.
What does juice mean for you?
Yeah. This is, it's not so much my work, but NYU has a game center where people learn the mastery and the art of creating video games. It's a phenomenal place in Brooklyn. And I spoke to some of the people there, some of the very, very bright people there. And I was asking questions about, how do you design a game so that people will play it? And there is a set of techniques. There's a set of tools, you can draw from them. There's an art to this as well. So you might have all the right boxes checked and you create a game and no one wants to play it. But you're more likely to create a game that people will want to play if you pick the right tools from the kit. And one of them is, again, it's giving the right kind of feedback. It's giving this kind of variable rewards where you don't always win, but you do at just the right rate so that people keep coming back for more. But it's not just about the schedule of winning when it happens. It's also about the amplification. So how big does the win feel? And, from the 80s on, there's a game that I've been playing forever in one form or another. It's that game where you have the paddle on the bottom of the screen and you're trying to hit the ball to break the bricks that are above you. It's like a kind of Space Invaders mechanic. It's the same mechanism that drives tons of games. So there was that version in the 80s. And what's happened over time is that very same kind of game has been redesigned over and over again with Juice. Juice is basically amplifying the feedback you get. If you think of Candy Crush, which took up I don't know how many millions of hours of life among the population, every time you got a line of 3 candies, it wasn't just like low grade, the candies disappeared, and then like Tetris, the next block fell. It was like, congratulations, and things were exploding, and there's this just incredible burst that translates into a much bigger dopamine hit. And it basically gives you a much stronger sense of reward. It amplifies the reward. That process of building that into games is juice. That's juicing up the game. It's basically dosing up the reward. And so a lot of companies will go through the game and say, where can we add juice to it's, you're not changing anything underlying about the game, but you're giving it that extra boost.
Adam Alter, professor of marketing at NYU Stern School of Business with an appointment in the psychology department, the author of Drunk Tank Pink and Irresistible, The Rise of Addictive Technologies. Adam, it's great to see you.
Thanks for having me, Scott.
Okay, so it's the holidays, it's the end of the year, and I'm trying to take stock of my blessings and also try and figure out how I can be happier. And I think we manage our careers, we manage our money, but we don't manage our happiness. We don't take time to think about, okay, how can I be better? We think about how can I be better at work? How can I have more money? How can I be happier? I teach brand strategy, and whenever I'm talking to the kids who all want to be brand strategists or brand managers at Procter & Gamble, they never sit down and think about, well, how do I manage my own brand? I think, they think about, okay, I know how to manage the shit out of Kellogg's or Coca-Cola, but I don't really know how to manage my own brand or reputation in the marketplace. They don't give it any thought. I don't think people give a lot of thought to actively managing their own happiness. And something I've decided to do around social media is I think I'm going to take a break from Twitter. It is my addiction. I constantly check it. Whenever I'm bored anywhere, I check it because I am an addict. I think everyone is addicted to something. I think everybody has a vice. I think it's part of human nature. Addiction or dopa hits are a function of instincts encourage you to do things that are good for the species. It's good for the species for you to eat because if you don't eat, you die. It's good for you to collect things because if you don't have a lot of shit around you, you starve. It's good for you to have sex because obviously that's key to the survival of the species. But unfortunately, sometimes we can't modulate these things. They become addictions and we start doing them to the point where, in fact, they start to impact negatively other parts of our lives. And the addiction I have that's beginning to negatively impact other parts of my life is Twitter. So what I'm going to ask you to do is to take an open and honest audit and also maybe sit down with your kids. I've noticed my kid is probably spending a little too much time on YouTube and assess what is the role that this platform plays in your happiness or lack thereof? What is the role it plays in terms of where does addiction become a real addiction? Where does joy for something and reward become something that starts to negatively impact other parts of your lives? I want you to actively manage your happiness. And one step here is I want you to look at every platform you use and decide what are the plus and minuses and what could you benefit from some modulation or some leaning out. And also something I am not addicted to, Christmas music. This is some Christmas music we'll sign off with. That is the Christmas music I hate the least. It's the holidays for the dog. He's getting a bone. He's getting a bone, and he's getting an ergonomically designed water bowl. Because he's 6'2". He's shorter. He used to be 6'3". Isn't that nice? I'm at the age where I'm shrinking. That's my Christmas gift from the big man in the sky. By the way, I don't believe in God, although I believe I am godlike in that I will never do anything for you ever, which makes me very similar to God in my view. Isn't that a wonderful way to bring in the holidays? All right, guys. Have a great holiday.